The sequel to the iconic action film of the 1980s definitely didn't let fans down, but the best part about Top Gun Maverick wasn't just the storyline. The production was incredible. Seriously, those were the most convincing flight scenes we've ever seen. In the 10-minute behind-the-scenes footage released, they showed us exactly what went down in filming those scenes and how real they actually were. And in this video, we're talking about just that. First up is pilot training. Those crazy flight scenes, they were shot in an actual Navy fighter plane. The actors trained for months with real military flight training. They learned aerobatics, G-forces, and even how to fly an L-19. Finally, they learned how an FA-18 Super Hornet works. Tom Cruise wanted the FA-18 flying scenes to look as authentic as possible, and we're glad he did, because the final result is amazing. Also, the behind-the-scenes footage shows the actors actually swimming underwater during their training. That's some serious dedication to a role. Next, we have the cockpit footage. The scenes in the cockpit were actually shot mid-air with a camera. The actors had to direct themselves. We can't imagine what kind of pressure they were under. They only had 40 minutes max to get in as much footage as they could. They had to do everything on their own. They had to time their lines at the perfect height while making sure that their visor wasn't fogged up and the mics were in the right place. They had no lighting up in the air, so they had to make sure they took the shots when the sun was hitting the plane, right? Imagine chasing a golden hour like that. Crazy. In an interview, the editor, Eddie Hamilton, revealed that actors would rehearse their lines on the ground with Joe, but in the air, they were responsible for each take, asking the pilots to fly the same route again if their line or action could be improved. Now for a day in the life of filming. This was some seriously intense filming. Tom Cruise didn't want to compromise on the epic scale of Top Gun at all. They would start filming daily early in the morning after a briefing at the naval facility that they used. There were almost 6 different facilities that showed up in the shoot. These included North Island, Fallon, and others. The planes had to be up by 9:30 at the latest. They had to get in as much as they could in just 1 hour of filming. Even this wouldn't get them enough footage. That's why they made a lot of flights in one day. The filming team mentioned that they did 2 trips a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. They were limited to 90 minutes of airtime, so they always had to make sure they had new batteries. Thankfully, the internal cameras have a maximum G-force of 7.5, so they definitely lasted a while. They also conducted the runs by looking at maps and the weather, so they could figure out which are the greatest runs to keep them as backlit as possible. The team was able to make alterations remotely due to the inside mechanics of the cameras when the weather went against them. These actors probably got no sleep, like seriously. They were working round the clock to capture the most natural looking scenes, and to us, it just looks like easy work. And now, onto locked camera problems. The original film creators had used a camera that could be moved throughout the cockpit, but obviously, for safety reasons, which we completely understand, they had to keep it locked in one place. One way they found around it was to get the actors to move their heads more to make it look more dynamic. The footage made it obvious that those smooth-looking plane scenes actually took a lot of work. At first, some actors took it easy and tried to just talk to the pilot so the footage looked okay, and then they wouldn't have to do too much. But then Tom decided to give the whole crew a talking to. Like, this man isn't an amazing actor for nothing. He encouraged them to give more exaggerated movements to make the scenes more intense. Next up, moving horizon shots. Some of the shots were really cool, especially when we could see the moving horizon. You'd never believe how they were made. Even though jet pilots normally don't fly up and down the horizon, the director wanted the scenery behind the actor to constantly be changing. So, to get some of that in, the pilots flew closer to mountains and at the bottom of canyons at almost 700 miles an hour. They flew across some of America's most difficult and beautiful places, including Rainbow Canyon, the western outskirts of Death Valley National Park, and Washington's Cascade Mountains. Now that's commitment. Now for a lot of footage, like seriously, there were cameras everywhere, not just in the actors' hands, but also attached to the planes. They had to fly almost 4 times a day so they could get the right shots. There was a ground unit and an air unit shooting at the same time. While the ground story was covered with the standard 2 to 3 cameras, the real magic was happening in the air. Inside the cockpit of each double-seat FA-18, 6 Sony Venice cameras were installed, 4 on the actor seated behind the pilot, and 2 over the pilot's shoulder. The pilots dressed similarly to the actors they were flying with matching helmets and colors to make it look authentic. The 4 cameras on the actor were all different in their focus, one broad and one tight front on, and 2 with a more 3/4 view from either side. DP Claudio Miranda adapted Venice's Rialto extension to fit into the small location. This technique uses a cable to connect the sensor block to the camera body. The sensor can capture a complete 6K in big format, appropriate for IMAX presentations, much beyond the quality of action cameras such as a GoPro. By the end of filming, the editing team had so much footage that they had no idea what to do with it. Kidding. But that kind of editing must have taken a long time, especially since films like these are exaggerated to give that effect. All the magic really does happen in the edits. Next we have sequence trouble. First, all camera video from each aircraft was timecode matched. The editing team for Hamilton then recorded every crucial moment, from the lines of conversation to when an actor's head turns, and in which direction. It was then a matter of chipping away at the mountain. In an interview, Hamilton said that he'd spend entire mornings just looking for the ideal photo of a plane wheeling to the left or flying downwards into a small canyon. He said every day he'd only get like seconds of footage, and it took a whole year to finish editing it all together. That's kind of ridiculous, but hey, it paid off. It was difficult to put together the sequence since he didn't have any outside pictures of the planes to depict the geography of the aerial action until months later. He mentioned that they used storyboards and visualized dogfights in advance. It was much harder to make an actual aircraft do exactly what they had envisioned. We found it really funny when we found out that Hamilton would put X-Men action figures up against his 65-inch monitor to get a feeling of size. Hamilton also credited editor Walter Murch. He said he learned a lot from him. He also revealed that he wanted every viewpoint to be spectacular, and it really was. And now, it's all in the edits. The film was actually made in the edits. There was so much mid-air footage, they had to squeeze that plot in somewhere. So Cruise got the actors to exaggerate as much as possible, and even get realistic dialogue into the shots. The film's editor mentioned that there was one scene in which Cruise was just shouting something at the pilot, but the intensity in his eyes looked so real that they decided to keep the scene. Who's doing it like Tom Cruise? One of the key reasons the movie turned out so well was Cruise's dedication to recording the ideal sequences. Seriously, this dude never sleeps. The director revealed that Cruise went out to reshoot the bomb footage sequence since he expected it to be cloudy the next day, and the footage he was able to obtain was just as good as he'd promised. Finally, we have getting some extra help from old-timers. The sequel had to live up to the original, so we kinda saw it coming when Hamilton, who was editing the sequence, reached out to Chris Levinson for some extra help. Look, Levinson won an Oscar for working on the first film, so if anybody knew how to shoot Top Gun, it was him. He showed Hamilton how to use footage strategically to film fight scenes. In an interview, Levinson even mentioned that the original was made the same way. It's definitely some convincing visual and audio production to make fighter plane scenes look so real. There's a reason the film turned out so great. It's all thanks to the hard work of the crew and the production team. Well done. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think of how the cockpit footage was shot? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.